cloud of human dust swept along by a tempest. Everything began to whirl before her. Then she closed her eyes. Big hot tears were rolling down her cheeks. Silver's eyelashes were also moist. "I don't see the men who left Plassans this afternoon," he murmured. He tried to distinguish the end of the column, which was still hidden by the darkness. Suddenly he cried with joyous exultation, "Ah, here they are! They've got the banner! The banner has been entrusted to them!" Then he wanted to leap from the slope in order to join his companions. At this moment, however, the insurgents halted. Words of command ran along the column. The Marseillaise died out in a final rumble, and one could only hear the confused murmuring of the still surging crowd. Silver, as he listened, caught the orders which were passed on from one contingent to another. They called the men of Plassans to the van. Then, as each battalion ranged itself alongside the road to make way for the banner, the young man reascended the embankment, dragging Miette with him. "Come," he said, "we can get across the river before they do." When they were on the top, among the ploughed land, they ran along to a mill whose lock bars the river. Then they crossed the Viorne on a plank placed there by the millers, and cut across the meadows of Sainte-Claire, running hand in hand, without exchanging a word. The column threw a dark line over the highway, which they followed alongside the hedges. There were some gaps in the hawthorns, and at last Silver and Miette sprang onto the road through one of them. In spite of the circuitous way they had come, they arrived at the same time as the men of Plassans. Silver shook hands with some of them. They must have thought he had heard of the new route they had chosen, and had come to meet them. Miette, whose face was half concealed by her hood, was scrutinized rather inquisitively. "Why, it's Chantegreil," at last said one of the men from the faubourg of Plassans, "the niece of Rebuffat, the mégère of the Jas-Meffrin." "Where have you sprung from, gadabout?" cried another voice. Silver, intoxicated with enthusiasm, had not thought of the distress which his sweetheart would feel at the jeers of the workmen. Miette, all confusion, looked at him as if to implore his aid, but before he could even open his lips another voice rose from the crowd, brutally exclaiming, "Her father's at the galleys. We don't want the daughter of a thief and murderer amongst us." At this Miette turned dreadfully pale. "You lie," she muttered. "If my father did kill anybody, he never thieved." And as Silver, pale and trembling more than she, began to clench his fists, "Stop!" she continued. "This is my affair." Then, turning to the men, she repeated with a shout, "You lie! You lie! He never stole a copper from anybody. You know it well enough. Why do you insult him when he can't be here?" She drew herself up, superb with indignation. With her ardent, half-wild nature, she seemed to accept the charge of murder composedly enough, but that of theft exasperated her. They knew it, and that was why folks, from stupid malice, often cast the accusation in her face. The man who had just called her father a thief was merely repeating what he had heard said for many years. The girl's defiant attitude only incited the workmen to jeer the more. Silver still had his fists clenched, and matters might have become serious if a poacher from the Seine, who had been sitting on a heap of stones at the roadside awaiting the order to march, had not come to the girl's assistance. "The little one's right," he said. "Chantegreil was one of us. I knew him. Nobody knows the real facts of his little matter. I always believed in the truth of his deposition before the judge. The gendarme whom he brought down with a bullet while he was out shooting was no doubt taking aim at him at the time. A man must defend himself. At all events, Chantegreil was a decent fellow. He committed no robbery." As often happens in such cases, the testimony of this poacher sufficed to bring other defenders to Miette's aid. Several workmen also professed to have known Chantegreil. Yes, it's true," they all said. "He wasn't a thief. There are some scoundrels at Plassans who ought to be sent to prison in his place. Chantegreil was our brother. Come now, be calm, little one." Miette had never before heard anyone speak well of her father. He was generally referred to as a beggar, a villain, and now she found good fellows who had forgiving words for him, and declared him to be an honest man. She burst into tears, again full of the emotion awakened in her by the Marseillaise, and she bethought herself how she might thank these men for their kindness to her in misfortune. For a moment she conceived the idea of shaking them all by the hand like a man, but her heart suggested something better. By her side stood the insurgent who carried the banner. She touched the staff, and to express her gratitude said in an entreating tone, "Give it to me. I will carry it." The simple-minded workmen understood the ingenious sublimity of this form of gratitude. "Yes," they all cried, "Chantegreil shall carry the banner." However, a woodcutter remarked that she would soon get tired and would not be able to go far. "Oh, I'm quite strong," she retorted proudly, tucking up her sleeves and showing a pair of arms as big as those of a grown woman. Then, as they handed her the flag, she resumed, "Wait just a moment." Forthwith she pulled off her cloak and put it on again after turning the red lining outside. In the clear moonlight she appeared to be arrayed in a purple mantle reaching to her feet. The hood, resting on the edge of her chignon, formed a kind of Phrygian cap. She took the flag, pressed the staff to her bosom, and held herself upright amid the folds of that blood-coloured banner which waved behind her. Enthusiastic child that she was, her countenance, with its curly hair, large eyes moist with tears, and lips parted in a smile, seemed to rise with energetic pride as she turned it towards the sky. At that moment she was the Virgin Liberty. The insurgents burst into applause. The vivid imagination of those southerners was fired with enthusiasm at the sudden apparition of this girl so nervously clasping their banner to her bosom. Shouts rose from the nearest group. "Bravo, Chantegreil! Chantegreil forever! She shall remain with us! She'll bring us luck!" They would have cheered her for a long time yet, had not the order to resume the march arrived. Whilst the column moved on, Miette pressed Silvère's hand and whispered in his ear, "You hear, I shall remain with you. Are you glad?" Silvère, without replying, returned the pressure. He consented. In fact, he was deeply affected, unable to resist the enthusiasm which fired his companions. Miette seemed to him so lovely, so grand, so saintly. During the whole climb up the hill, he still saw her before him, radiant amidst a purple glory. She was now blended with his other adored mistress, the Republic. He would have liked to be in action already, with his gun on his shoulder. But the insurgents moved slowly. They had orders to make as little noise as possible. Thus the column advanced between the rows of elms like some gigantic serpent whose every ring had a strange quivering. The frosty December night had again sunk into silence, and the Viorne alone seemed to roar more loudly. On reaching the first houses of the faubourg, Silvère ran on in front to fetch his gun from the Aire Saint-Mitre, which he found slumbering in the moonlight. When he again joined the insurgents, they had reached the Porte de Rome. Miette bent towards him, and with her childish smile observed, "I feel as if I were at the procession on Corpus Christi Day, carrying the banner of the Virgin." End of section 2.